Today on Conversation Aloud, we're discussing storytelling in film and media and the impact of technology, such as AI, on the entertainment industry. We're joined by John Wayne, who is a producer, a director, a storyteller, having been involved in dozens of films and music videos. He's also the founder of London Town Pictures. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you so much. I'm always grateful when someone allows me on their platform, so I'm always humbled by that.
Thank you for coming on. Really glad to have you on and have this discussion. Um, John, when it comes to creativity, do you, as a storyteller, as a director, producer, have you always seen yourself as a creative, or is it something that you've developed?
I think initially, kids, when I grew up, I wanted to be Spider-Man, so
It's funny enough, that's what I wanted to be too.
so you have this ideas about what you want to do and what you want to be. Um, for me, a lot of people were pushing me toward one direction, and I just kind of went to with the flow. It wasn't until some things that happened in life that kind of pushed me to the point to where maybe this is something that I want to do. So I didn't start off wanting to be a filmmaker or storyteller. I started off I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an old folks doctor. I wanted to specialize in geriatrics. You know,
Wow, that's quite different.
yeah, that's such a story within itself, which is funny. And every time I think about it, I'm not really good with people being in pain and needles, so I'm not exactly sure how that was going to be a really good career path for me.
Yeah.
But in the process of going through that, I realized that that was not the calling for me. That storytelling was the calling.
That's awesome, and it's such a different kind of area. So when it comes to your point, we're all kind of creative, especially as children. We have that creative energy, and somehow as we grow older, that create we were kind of, I guess it's a school system maybe or something. We're kind of closing in on that creativity side. So, was there a moment in that transition between wanting to be a doctor and not, where you felt like actually you had that creative side that you wanted to tap more into, or was it kind of worrying for you to kind of enter that arena of storytelling? And is it something that you had to really work on to develop?
So storytelling for me comes a little bit natural. Uh, the way my mind works and the way I see the world. I see the world in images. I see the world in pictures and moving images. And so when I create something or I'm telling someone about, some idea, I've already seen it in completion in my mind. For me, and I think for a lot of people, when it comes to being creativity, sometimes that's not really fostered because it's looked upon as being a career that's not very sustainable and profitable. And so your parents are not necessarily encouraging people to be actors per se or creatives per se because the traditional go to school go to school and be a doctor, lawyer, things that sort is the direction that most people send their kids through. So it's a sustainable.
Yeah.
They can clearly see how they can sustain themselves. For me, um, wanting to be a doctor was more of a just aspect of just analytical thinking. I'm a very big analytical and analyzing stuff. But answer to your point, I remember the after I decided I was going to go into being, music videos and film. I was doing a music video at the time, and I was sitting in the van doing the paperwork. And I remember when I was in the third grade, there was an assembly program. They don't really do too much. I'm not sure about over there, but when I was young, they would take a popular song and the kids would all sing the song, and then they would do like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And so my song was the stylistic "People Want to Make the World Go Round." So when they got to me, my mother had bought me this Indiana Jones had a slate and everything. When they got to me, I said, "I want to be a film producer." I don't know where that came from. That was like in the third grade. Once I said and did that, it was over. I never thought about it again until I was sitting in that van doing the music video. And I realized at that moment, I remembered that experience in third grade. I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it was almost kind of epiphany. It just kind of opened up my eyes to that creativity was there. And I just went with it. And at the time I was a pre-med student and I had trying to determine where I was going to go to medical school. So this kind of all happened like within a 6 month period of time. And this production manager called me and said that I had volunteered to work on a not volunteer, but I left a message on the answer machine to work on a film, an indie film. And I was like, no, I didn't. She's like, yes, you did. We went back and forth, and at the time, I wasn't really doing anything. And they needed a second assistant director on a film. So I went in to talk to the first assistant director. I was having my suit and tie, I was all dressed up. And about 5 minutes into the conversation, you realized that I knew nothing about film and I couldn't help them do anything. So she called me back and said, I can't give you that job, but I have a production assistant job in the art department. Would you be interested? She said, we're working 16 days a week, 6 weeks straight, 6 days a week, and the pay was $50 a week. And something overcame me and said, yes, I'll do it. And that was kind of like the forte into me eventually, doing other stuff. But it was just like this happenstance. I didn't know, just kind of being in the right place at the right time. And ironically enough, just the way once again the university worked, the movie I worked on was called Scenes for the Soul. It was director George Tillman's first film out of film school. George Tillman went on to do Men of Honor. He did all the barbershop movies, a lot of big movies, but this is his first film out of film school. And so I just happened to be at a process to where he was growing. Some other people I met were growing. And so we just kind of like, it just kind of went in that direction.
That's awesome. So, you got this random call, which you weren't even looking for. I guess maybe a part of you was deep inside looking for that role, and suddenly the universe kind of provided that, and it was an opportunity you couldn't let go. That's very interesting. And you've released a number of movies, music videos, and some documentaries. I think recently you released the Greenwood Avenue project. What drew you to the Greenwood story in particular? What moment or detail made you say, I have to tell this?
I think a lot of things about it is that there are a lot of things, especially in American history, that the old adage is that the history is written by the victor. And when people go through things and there are things that they don't feel real confident or positive about, or they don't make them feel good, they tend to have a way of retelling the story. It's human nature. You retell a story in a way that crafts you in a more positive light. In 1921, this prosperous community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was being prosperous, and for some reason, it's self-sustainable. Wasn't dependent on anybody else. Wasn't dependent on another community or anyone else. They were self-sustainable. They were prospering. Well, this didn't sit well with another community nearby, and so they decided that they were going to take them over. And so it's like one of the first incidents of America or the government dropping cocktail bombs on the city, burning the city down. The people couldn't rebuild because the insurance company wouldn't take their claim. So in essence, they just took it away from them. And it's a story when I tell people about that, people are not familiar with it. It is one of those things in history that's
Mm,
known but unknown. It's not spoken. Even in people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they say that it was not taught in the school system because it's an embarrassing point to someone. It doesn't make them look good as a city. So people tend to, as I stated before, to find other things that they can kind of floss over as if it didn't happen. So even in the documentary, you talk to some of the older residents who were young kids or the history is passed down to them, they were kind of told not to talk about it because it was one of those things to where they felt like they needed to grow from it. But the thing about growth and people moving forward is that you really need to know have a discussion about your past. And if you don't have those discussions about your past, it tends to repeat. And he's like, how do I get in this situation all over again? Because nobody talked about it. Even if it's hurting, you need
mm.
to at least talk about it.
And that's really interesting. And you said there that the government was throwing the fire on buildings, and that community is it a Black American African community, um,
Yes, it was.
and
Yeah, 100%.
and was that a big community at that time in that area? And were they kind of forced to just had to live with each other because no one would allow them to kind of move to neighboring places, or what was the situation at that point there?
So in American history, we have a period of time where even after they outlawed slavery and everybody was allowed to go and be free per se, When you don't provide economic, if you take everything from someone and then just tell them out, okay, figure it out, they have to figure it out. There's no government program, there's no bailout, there's no money to do that. And so over a course of time, they figured it out. They began to be self-sustaining. They began to build a community. It was a very strong and powerful community. If people remember back during the time, this particular time in the early 1900s, it was doing Oklahoma and the gold rush. So there was a big gold rush in Oklahoma where everybody was going to get the gold there, oil, and a lot of other things. And so there were money to be made. And so they couldn't go and shop in the other stores in other parts of the city because they just weren't allowed. Black people were not allowed from drinking fountains or going to certain bathrooms or certain restaurants. And so they community a community amongst itself. Just because you can't be allowed over here doesn't mean that you don't eat or you have to buy clothes and go to send your kids to school. All those things happen regardless of what somebody doesn't want you to do. And so they created a community with themselves. The money was flowing, the opportunity was there. And so they created a community because they could not integrate and be with the others. And so their community was prosperous, but it was probably doing way better without them, and they couldn't understand it. The one thing that kind of set the race massacre apart is that someone accused a young boy of whistling or trying to flirt with this white woman, which wasn't the case. And so back during that time, that was something that you didn't do. And so they wanted to lynch him. They wanted to hang him. And the community wouldn't. They fought back. They wouldn't let him do it. And so that really what started it. They wanted to come over and lynch him for flirting with this woman, and the community wouldn't allow it. So that kind of really started the whole race war.
Wow. And to your point, if we can't talk about those things, then we can't learn from those things. And it is a difficult thing to talk about because it's difficult that part of your group carried out such activities. Um, Not your group, as in like the group that did carry out those activities. But it also kind of begs the question: what else is missing from the history books, right? If all those details are not there, it's amazing what else can be missing from there. Was there a scene or a character in the documentary that was kind of emotionally difficult for you to write about or kind of direct?
I don't think being an African American. I've been black all my life, so I'm okay with being black and what the history brings. A lot of times, what happens is when people start to talk about it, especially when they have unresolved emotion, it's an emotional thing to think about. People were being segregated or killed because they just looked a certain color, not because they were looked different per se, like the body, or they did something differently, spoke something differently, just because of their skin color. And so there is a lot, like you said, there's a lot of things in our story. Like I always think about the fact that they have the story of we have this transatlantic slave trade. I think it's like millions of people came on from Africa, but for some reason, where are these boats at? I know where the Mayflower is at. I know where all these other boats that came from different places. But if you bring in millions and millions of people, there has to be some slave boats somewhere. There has to be some sunken boats somewhere. What are we not being told about their history? It doesn't really make any sense. And a lot of times, if people destroy, uh, having bad things happen in government and in countries is not an unusual thing. You have the Nazis with the Jews. We have the camps in America with the Asians. So the Indians, So it's not as if those difficult conversations have never been had. The only thing difference is that the one with African Americans per se, nobody wants to have that. Nobody wants to have that real discussion. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is that such a hard? Because everybody else gets reparations, everybody else gets a discussion, everybody else finds a path to saying, I'm sorry and I apologize. But for some reason, this particular subject does not seem to translate to that. We have lots of studies that talk about it. The government issues these task forces. Let's study reparation, let's study certain things. But for some reason, it does not come to fruition. It just kind of gets stalled. We talk about it, but never do anything about it. And so that's a question by itself. I always tell people, especially when it comes to politics and things of that sort, I'm not so much concerned about what we can see. I'm more concerned about the stuff that they don't allow us to see, the things that they're doing. So if you look at a news, particularly in America, if something is on the news and they're talking about it, it is something probably happened some time ago. I'm more concerned with what's happening right now that we don't know about, that we're going to know in a couple of weeks, And so that's the story of how things happen, especially in America, how just when it comes to race, that it's a discussion that nobody wants to have.
Do you do you still see, talking about the story about, race? Is it something that is getting easier to discuss compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, or is it getting harder to discuss?
I think with the advent of technology and just the opening up, uh, we are getting access to resources and things of that sort. It makes it a little bit easy for us to get information. But in this particular company, for some reason, the last 10, 15 years or so, they're building this campaign to not teach certain things or have not have those discussions. And you have to ask yourself, why are you so afraid to have these discussions? Because if any, when I look at movies or read books or things that have to do with slavery and that, it's emotionally taxing on me because I feel like it's part of my history, some relative that happened to to them that's connected to me. The people who don't want to have a conversation, it's like there, it shouldn't be really that emotional for you because it didn't happen to you. It didn't happen to people. So why are you so you don't want to have the discussion? We're just having a conversation.
Yeah, I think it's it's also it's a different type of difficult, for other people. I think it's the same thing as why maybe Germans don't want to talk about what happened during the 30s and 40s that much, because it's did we really do that? Did that actually happen? It's just very hard to make sense of how humanity can actually carry out such activities, and how, my grandfather was part of that, or my great great grandfather was a part of that. It's kind of, you want to be in denial, I think, about that. So I feel like it's a different type of difficulty, that that group would face,
But I
I
get
think.
that. I really do get that 100%. And the reason why I say that is because in America, technically, we've really only been out of quote unquote slavery for about 50 years, technically. There was Jim Crow and all other things. So, with the passing of the Voting Rights Act and some other things that they did, we have literally only been about 50 some years that we've been able to just, be prosperous. So, it hasn't been that long a period of time. Also, too, a lot of times when it comes to those conversations with people, people have to admit that something isn't right and they take it personal as if they did it. I'm not saying that you did it, but you are benefiting from people who, it's like if I take out an insurance policy and $1 million insurance policy on myself, and so I leave my children as benefactors. When I pass away, they get $1 million, and they start to spend money and do things for it. It's because something that happened before. It wasn't the day I died. It was something that I had planned or something that I had to deal with before. And so sometimes people they benefit from stuff, but then they didn't want to discuss it. So my kids have benefit from the money they get, but they also have to deal with the fact that I'm dead.
Hmm.
You reconcile that. Dad left us this money, but he had to die to do it. You benefit from all the things that come from being a white and European or whatever case may be. Even though you didn't have to set anything in motion, you benefit from it. And I think just the acknowledgement from it is enough. If people just acknowledge that and say that I benefit from it, I think I think we can start to have real conversations.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. Do you think that, uh, every white person has benefited from that? Because I feel like people have for sure benefited from what happened during that period, but then there's a lot of other people that are also like struggling a lot in today's age, and they're thinking, where did I benefit from that?
Okay,
I
so
Yeah,
I get that question a lot. When we have this discussion, people they do like say, "Well, I'm living in a trailer park. I'm barely making it. I'm getting assistance from the government. How am I benefited?"
yeah,
From an African American standpoint, I'm going to say it in this particular aspect. So we're used to things always going wrong. When I go into a meeting, I go into a place. I'm gonna give you a real example. Years ago when I was living in Chicago, this production company, big production company, had found out about me. I was doing music videos at the time. This is before the internet, so you can't just Google somebody and look them up. You just through word of mouth. And they wanted to bring me on to do some stuff with them. So the lady called me. We had a whole conversation, really good conversation. I sent my CVs in. And it's like really good. She's like, okay, it was just come on down to the office. I want to introduce you to everybody. You know, it sounded like a done deal. It was just a matter of just coming meeting everybody. So I come down to the office and I'm sitting there. I go up to the receptionist, tell them, John Wayne. And she's like, okay. The lady comes, she gets on the phone, calls the lady comes to the front, and she walks out. She said, I thought you told me John Wayne was here. She said, yeah, he is. He's sitting right there. She didn't know I was black.
Mm.
And at that particular moment, although she walked me around, the way she looked at me and the way our conversation went, I wasn't getting that job.
Mm.
It wasn't going to happen. She walked me around to a couple of people, but she never called me again. And I saw her years later when I was working on a thing for the Library of Congress. I was working on this project for them, and she was, I think, editing at a place I was at, and she looked at me. I looked at her. I just smiled, and I kept walking. So that type of thing, those
The
subtle
bias kind of
things,
thing. Okay. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And so I'm not white, so I don't know what they go through or what their struggles are and how they perceive life, but sometimes from a black perspective, we look at a lot of time white folks and they walk around with just anything is possible.
Mm.
If you had told me a couple of years before Barack Obama was the president, if that was possible, I was like, they're not going to let a black man be president. They're not going to let, because that's how black people look. They said they're not going to let him be president. When he became president, even though I didn't want to be president, what it did was it opened up to me to the possibility that I could be, even though I didn't want to.
Mm.
And when possibilities and ideas get fixed in people's mind, then they start to think bigger. And so the representation of seeing him in office made me say, wow, maybe I can do something. Maybe it's not what they will let me do, what I'm willing to do to make it happen.
Mm.
And that perceived in your mind for years of slavery, all that, it's like trauma. It's in my DNA. It's trauma of that they're going to do something. They're going to keep me doing it. Slowly, of that got chipped away. Not a possibility of it. And so they benefit from not having that. They walk into a bank, they walk somewhere, they walk in the idea of, I'm entitled to this because I'm an American citizen. When they get stopped by the police, they say crazy stuff to the police because they figure like, well, I'm entitled. I'm putting my hand on the steering wheel and like, yes, sir, no, sir, I'm reaching for my ID. I'm doing that because of what my understanding about life is. So it's a perspective.
Mm.
And no matter how much you try to explain that to people, or they won't get it because I don't, if I knew the magic word to get them to make the correlation between, get that aha moment of like, okay, I get it. I would tell them that, but I don't know what comparable story I can give them to make them understand it.
Yeah, and I see the point there. And it's very difficult for any other person to understand because it's like saying, imagine you don't have an arm. You could think about it, but you'll never really know what it feels like because you're not going to live that experience. So it's very hard to they can imagine it, but there's a limit to how far they can go with that. But to your point, seeing Obama become president, it's like the box that you know people find themselves in, even though maybe they don't even realize that they're in a box. It's just kind of the environment that they're in that has created that box suddenly opens up, and there's an endless amount of opportunities that now they can kind of follow through because they feel like there's no one can say no. People will kind of accept me as a person, with my skills and my abilities instead of the other things that people look at usually
Yeah.
around. So yeah, no, I completely understand that point.
It's the reason why people say things about representation matters. If I can see myself, when I see Obama, I see a father, I see an uncle, a brother, I see someone who looks like me.
Yeah,
And if I can see myself that way, then I can see the possibility of, me doing other things.
yeah, no, totally agree. Just going back on on the Greenwood community. They rebuilt themselves after the atrocities that happened to them. What are the lessons, or what lessons does the resilience resilience hold for today's generation, or what other lessons are there to be had from that?
I think a lot of things with that particular community, I think a lot of things that they tend to understand about the Greenwood is one, that they're teaching the young kids what happened. This is what happened. This is, these are the circumstances, bad, good, or indifferent. This is not a matter of me pushing the narrative one way or the other. I'm just stating the facts of what happened. And knowing that you come from something of people who were prosperous in America, for some reason, they believe the way history is made that African American history started right at slavery. You know, as if we didn't have something before.
Mm.
But in our history, there is none. I mean, if you're going to conquer somebody, if you're going to take over somebody, it has to be a reason why they have something that you want. So what did we have that you wanted so bad? And so if in their community, they're teaching their kids about the economic empowerment, that is a possibility that they can do these things. They can be prosperous within themselves and within other communities. It teaches them that they can be more than what they see, more than what what's around them. The possibility, and the possibility is probably more, teaching that is probably more, it's a stronger thing than anything else. The possibility that this can happen.
The possibility that this can happen, what happened, and also, I guess, coming out of challenging things like that.
Yeah, so the possibility that this sort of thing can repeat itself.
Mm.
A good example that in our age we can understand about things repeating itself is COVID. Almost 100 years to the moment when the Spanish influenza came, they had the same situation where everybody was told to stay indoors, cover your mouth, watch your hand. The same thing. And almost 100 years to when that happened, it repeated itself because most of the people who were alive during the time were either dead or no one, they didn't know anything about it. So when stuff happened, people were like, oh, what's happening? Why we got to do this? They were confused.
Mm.
And so it's the reason why we have cold. And you go to the drugstore, you got the cold section, the flu, which is Spanish influenza, and eventually they're going to have COVID because people forget. People forget. It
Yeah.
is amazing how that is, especially in America. The news cycle is only 2 or 3 days, and people forget. That's why in a couple of years when they have the election again, whatever issue people dealing with now, they'll be all upset about it. But doing that when a couple of years it's time to vote again, they'll vote for the same person who put them in the bad situation because they forget. We easy and distracted. Television and media is such a distraction, And so if we constantly telling our kids about what happened, the cause and effect, and how we can keep from that happening, then hopefully maybe people won't repeat the same thing. But people do it. Why is McDonald's, by no stretch of the imagination, has the best hamburgers in the world? But they sell millions of hamburgers every single day because they're very good marketers. How you market yourself and how you present people's ideas and things determines how people are prosperous or not, or if they should do something, or what they should wear. Should women wear low cut, high cut this season because they're pushing us in a certain direction? And the more that you can get kids grounded and stay focused on what's really happening, you can keep them from repeating stuff and stay them focused on what the bigger goals are.
Yeah, it's storytelling is very interesting when it comes to both film and marketing. There's an element of what is the feeling that you want the person to have. When you're thinking, when you're doing your the documentary, there's a lot of historical context, of course, but also you are having some creative process in there. How do you balance that? Do you think when you're doing the historical context, do you think about what is the feeling that you want the audience to have?
What storytelling by itself, there are a variety of different things that happens when you tell a story. Depending on the type of story, direction of cameras, we moving cameras makes a difference. Colors that people wear, the music. Music is a very strong thing to get people to move in a certain direction. And because we have been programmed by that, it's back in the day, they used to have when you go to a studio audience to tape a live show, they will have signs that say applause, clap, laugh. They tell you exactly what to do. And so television has, and then just media in general, we find ways to emotionally get people to connect in a certain way. So it's either the music or inflections in people's voices. People tell stories. There's a different way to tell a story. I can say, hey, we had a really great time. Or I can say, hey, we had a really great time. Those two communicate two different things.
Mm,
So depending on how someone says something and how the situation, or if they're really telling a story and there's really emotion to it, pauses and inflections and how people say stuff have a big way of how the audience responds. The images that you show someone before someone's telling the story, you showing some old documentary, some old footage of back in the day, and everybody's in black and white, and then somebody tells a story. She's like, "Well, I was 5 years old when that happened," and she tells a story. It encourages people to put themselves in that way.
mm.
A lot of stuff, like if you look at pictures of Martin Luther King or Malcolm X and things of the sort, a lot of times they're in black and white. Why is that? They had color camera. They had color during that time, but it makes it seem like historical, and it makes people feel a certain way. So storytelling, if you're trying to get people to go a certain direction, emotionally involved with it, you have to do things that people naturally, connect with, and that is either music or how someone says something. That's how you get people to really connect to what you're doing.
That's really interesting. The frame you set before even having the clip in there, how it allows someone to look at something from a particular frame of mind, which you don't really think about when you're watching a movie, of course, because you're not the director. But that's, yeah, I think my next movie, I'm going to kind of focus on that now, actually. Um,
Well, the way that you really do that is the reason why we have trailers, because trailers to television and movies kind of sets the tone within that 1.5 to 2 minutes of what they want you to take away from it.
mm,
So most people now go into looking at movies based off what the trailer is. It's like, wow, this trailer's really great. I want to see the movie. Trailer's only 2 minutes. The movie's almost 2 hours long. So
yeah.
that
I
tell you
I
right
just
there.
feel like trailers nowadays they give so much. It's like I don't want to watch the trailer because I feel like it's going to ruin the movie. So it's interesting, but there are trailers where they're really good at not giving that much, but making you want more.
Curious.
Uh, and then there are trailers where I feel like that's the summary of the movie you just given me. It's interesting. When it comes to technology, we have now AI, and people can code apps. They can create animation with the technology. Do you think this kind of resource is going to allow a lot of people to tell more stories that wouldn't have otherwise been shown? What we were talking about before, how there's a lot of historical context that's not really discussed. And given that we live in the era of loving to watch movies, and now more people can create movies more easily, is that going to be a positive thing when it comes to describing historical context that we wouldn't have been able to see?
So that depends on a couple of different things. It's like when I started off in film, I started with film, like film reels, real film. You got to get developed and processed. Everything is digital. I remember when he was making the transition from film to digital was hard for me because that's where I come from. And if you look at the image, the digital image at the time, it was very flat. Film has a very depth of characters, a very rich in a lot of ways, and so it's different. But most people really couldn't see the difference. And over a period of time, digital got better.
Sorry, in that moment, did you feel like uh, that's not going to be successful because there's an obvious difference, and that is more richer? The film is more richer instead compared to digital.
Well, my bias was that I didn't necessarily think it would work for the long term. But people what I look at in film and the way I judge and grade stuff, it's not what the normal person looks at. They're looking to be entertained. And even if I tried to point out the difference in both of them, they just either wouldn't see it or it wouldn't make a difference. So it got to a point to
Mm,
where you can see the difference in film. You can clearly see it, but it didn't make a difference anymore. People just didn't care, and with so much content is being flooded to us, and the fact that we have cell phones to look at movies now, we don't have to wait. When I was growing up, you the cycle was the big tent movie would come out at the movie theater, we all go see it. A year later it will come on TV as a big thing, like we wait on, Monday, Sunday, whatever it was, and we see it. And then eventually, now, I mean, it'll go on regular TV, and then it go like VHS eventually. Now, most people look at movies on their phone. They don't feel like
yeah,
they need the experience at the theater. And so,
yeah. It's very hard to notice the details on your phone.
no, you don't really see you most platforms, particularly like a Tubi, they're streaming in 720 because
Mm,
there's no need for 4K on your phone, because it's the screen is so little and everything's going to look crisp and clean on your phone.
yeah.
So I think with AI, I think that people, as time go on, they may not care as much as long as it's a really good story, and and it's making sense to them. They've been entertained, happy, sad, laugh, or whatever case they're trying to go after. I don't think they'll care as long as it's great storytelling. And then at the point now to where they're taking people's likenesses, and if the technology gets better, does Berry really need to be in the movie? She just come in for a day or two. They can get her likeness. She doesn't even need to do voiceover. Just pay her for her likeness, and then they'll do a whole AI movie with her.
There's actually a Black Mirror episode on this
Hmm.
exact thing whereby suddenly I think it was Selma Hayek. She didn't realize she signed a contract that gave the
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
that gave the producers rights to doing any movie involved in her. She doesn't have to even approve it anymore because they have the rights of her digital self, which is crazy. That might actually happen.
yeah. And the technology gets better and better. It's just the possibility. I think about the movie Sinners, how Michael B. Jordan is playing those two characters. And back in the day when you did something like that, you could kind of see some weirdness on the screen a little bit, but now it's pretty seamless. I mean, and as time go on and it gets better, will people be okay with that? I think the general public will be okay. They really don't have those type of they don't care about rights, and they just want to be entertained, so they're not going to get into that. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a good tool for writing and being creative. Something that would take.
How do you use it?
I use a lot for fleshing out ideas sometimes. And although I work with a writing team, sometimes you're looking for multiple ways of seeing a story in order to tell a great story. So you need to really kind of understand it. So it really helps with seeing multiple aspects of the story, even if you never write from those particular points of views. Just to see those possibilities, it helps you make a more well-rounded story. It kind of helps you get rid of some holes and things of that sort. So I like it from that
So when you
aspect.
say different perspectives, what do you mean by that?
So
Like in what way?
if I came up with a concept for a movie, let's just say we're going to do a movie about a paper cup. So a paper cup, he's sitting on the table, somebody's drinking from it, and throws it away. There are multiple ways of looking at that. Somebody had to make the paper cup. The paper had to come from where it came from, a tree. Then what happened after you threw it in the garbage? Did it go to compost? Did it get recycled? What? There are multiple different dimensions on that paper cup. The paper cup could have had a flaw on it, and so now it's valuable. Now it's sitting on top of a mantle somewhere because now it has this weird flaw that everybody sees. Or it could just be somebody crushed it and put it underneath a leg of a wobbly table, and it sat there for years. So there are multiple angles to go through. And so when you go through those particular angles, especially with AI, they provide those different things, you get to see how to tell complex stories in a way that that people traditionally wouldn't normally do, or it would take a longer time to do.
Yeah. You just reminded me of the first scene of A War of Lords, or is it Lord of Wars? Lord of War,
Mhm.
where have you seen that movie with Nicolas Cage,
No,
whereby it's
I'm
about
familiar with it. I haven't seen it. I'm familiar with it.
yeah, it's kind of like they show how it's a piece of metal, then it's in a factory. They crush it, they make a bullet out of it. It goes into the airplane, it's transported to somewhere in Africa. They throw the bullets all around the ground. A kid gets it and starts shooting at people, and that's how kind of the civil war is happening. And it's just kind of the story, which is exactly what you were saying over there
Yeah.
of that. That's really interesting. So you use AI to kind of uh, poke at different angles to see how a story can have depth in different angles.
Yes, yes, it's very good with that because although I think eventually we would get to all those particular angles, it would just take time, and AI can do it within a matter of seconds. Honestly, the key to using AI is writing good prompts. I use AI also for storyboards, and the way I kind of like describe AI is it's like a multi-dimension character. Uh, you're trying to get it to describe this dimension when it doesn't really understand this dimension. And sometimes, like with the Google Gemini actually looks at images. ChatGPT does not look at images. And even when you go and you upload video, it'll tell you that I can't see that. So you have to describe it very completely describe it. I used it one time for one movie I did, and I said I wanted these two guys sitting in the front seat of this older car. One had cornrows in his hair, the other person had a short haircut. They had tattoos on and everything. Great prompt. It did exactly that. Now the one thing it did wrong was because I guess I just didn't tell it. Instead of them being sitting in the front seat facing the windshield, they were turned backwards, looking at out the back window. Everything else was there because
Mm.
it doesn't understand that. It doesn't understand that if you sit in the car, we all facing the windshield, especially if you're driving. It did exactly what I told it to do, but they were facing the back window. Weird, weird how how that is. But it doesn't understand it. Even
Mm.
when I first started doing using ChatGPT, I would have to. It didn't initially understand what African American was or black. It didn't understand that. And it took time after using overtime that I have to prompt it. But because if I don't prompt it, it automatically plays a white person European. It just automatically does that, unless I say it. If I want a Hispanic or I want an Asian or I want somebody black, it automatically goes that particular direction. And at first, it didn't
Mm.
understand what that was, and it took some time for me to understand how to prompt it to do exactly what I need for it to do.
That's really interesting. Because I guess the database it has doesn't have that information. But I guess we are entering into a world where people who are creative can create uh, original stories with less money than required, which means there isn't a ceiling on them. The ceiling is just really their creativity. And we can create more movies, whether it's the movies like animation, like Soul, or actual movies that you wouldn't even realize they're animations. And so I guess it's a scary thing for people who are already in that industry, but it's also an exciting thing for people who want to enter into that industry, right?
Yeah. So I guess it depends on what side of the the world you live in. Are you a creative who's creating things and that's how you're making a living? Or are you a person who's distributing things and publishing things? So there's benefits to both sides. To the distributor or publisher of things, it shows their creativity only goes as far as their mind can go. And so they can create and put a lot of stuff out to the universe with less the budget is less and less issues you have to have with paperwork or trying to convince somebody they should do this negotiation. You don't have to really do all that. You don't have to negotiate with AI. You just buy enough cloud storage and
Yeah.
enough and hire enough people who understand how to do AI prompts. From a creative standpoint, um, its benefits obviously in expanding your creativity, but then if people can get it for way less without your spin on it, then the desire for them to want to buy it from you to collaborate with you becomes less. And even if they do, they don't really have to, in some aspects, there's not a lot of negotiation because they figure, well, if you don't come up with it, we probably can sit here and just come up with it. The president of the label of the streaming platform or the distributor, they can sit down in front of their desk all day, just come up with ideas. And if you prompt AI the right way, they'll come up with ideas for you. You know, he give them some parameters, and so I could see it. You know, from a creative standpoint, someone who's creating media, I can see how it could be a problem, and there be some parameters on it. So I think it's a scary time because there's really no regulation on it of how you do it. Just like with every great new thing, there's always somebody has to regulate it or try to find a way to to keep it fair. But like most times with the government, when they figure out how to make money from it, how to tax it, then it'll become a wider thing. It's just like with
Mm.
marijuana. Marijuana's been around for years. It's not something new. It's but the government couldn't figure out how to tax it. They couldn't figure out how to regulate it. They couldn't figure out how to control it. And once they figure out how to control it, then it becomes okay. We can use it now. We can sell it in the store because I understand how to get my money from it. But before then, when people were doing
Yeah.
it, like the lottery, one thing that came from the African American community was called numbers. Minorities would have this the same kind of thing. People pay a number, they pick a number, and if they win, they get some money. It became outlawed. It's like, oh, you can't be doing that until they figured out how to make money from it, how to regulate it, and then now it's okay. So the same thing with AI. When people really figure out,
Like the mafia.
you said what?
It's like the mafia.
Yeah,
That someone's making money, they need to get a cut.
they need to get a cut. And once they figure that
Yeah.
out with AI and really understand it, then it'll be, they'll find a way to regulate it. Everybody will be using it.
Yeah. What's one thing AI will you think never be able to do in filmmaking? At least not in our lifetime.
The thing about writing is that you have to interject a certain degree of emotion into writing. And you, I don't think AI can inflect, no matter what kind of props you may use. I don't think AI is able to interject emotion into words. There's a difference
Mm.
between teaching someone how to sing and somebody singing. There's two different things, they're not the same thing. I can teach you how to sing, but I can't teach you how to sing. There's two totally different things. You can listen to somebody singing and they're all on everything, and then somebody else singing that touches you. You can't teach AI because AI doesn't have an emotion like that. You can't teach them
Mm.
that. So that emotional, humanistic thing of that, of becoming and understanding life, unless it becomes sentient, it doesn't understand that. And so I think that that is probably the biggest thing that AI cannot do. It can't be human.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree with that. Yeah. And I guess what's your biggest hope and biggest fear for storytelling in the AI age?
I guess the biggest hope that we can find ways to, as a creative, find ways of me coming up with ideas, and I can find faster ways to getting out in front of people. I come up with an idea, dream up a concept or a vision, and find faster ways for me just to put it in there, and it like brings it to fruition. The flip side to that is that just like I can do it, the people who have more resources and the people who have control of distribution sources will find ways to not need those creators. We don't need you because we can just come up with it
Mm.
ourselves. We're going to sit here and buy some AI, hire some AI prompt engineers, and they're just going to pump out movies every day.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the biggest fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, But to your point, it's very hard to do that and install emotion
Yes,
in people. That requires a certain skill set.
yes, it does.
Yeah. John, this has been fascinating. Is there something that we didn't touch on that you feel like we should be touching on?
No, very good conversation. I think we talked a lot of things. We talk about the one thing I love to talk about, which is politics in a way. Although I am a creator who's creative, I do enjoy politics. So anytime I can get time to talk about politics and Doctor Who, those are my two things I'm always looking
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have no knowledge in Doctor Who, except I know it exists.
for.
John, if people want to reach out,
I'm pretty easy on all social platforms. I am John Wayne SIII from Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever it is, to LinkedIn. I'm John Wayne SIII. Very Googleable. So if you typed it in, you'll be able to find me.
awesome, and we'll put that in the show notes. John, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so far. I'm humble. I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.